The following recording of the first few pages of this book are brought to you by the Tulsa City County Library as part of our Kids Read Curious World project. My name is Mr. Paul. Lily and Kosmo in Outer Space by Jonathan Ashley. Chapter 1. Brooklyn, Earth, 1949. The night Lily Lupino locked herself in the bathroom and cut off all her hair, a piece of space crash-landed in her living room in the form of a boy astronaut named Kosmo Kid. He came by rocket, a small beat-up number that smashed through the ceiling while the Lupinos slept. Well, not Lily. Lily was too mad to sleep. It started with a radio looming over the living room like a cherrywood lighthouse, and the whine of a theremin announcing the start of tonight's episode of Trip Darrow, Star Pilot. Mr. Lupino was done listening to the evening news, and Mrs. Lupino's favorite music program, Bandstand, didn't come on until 8. 7 p.m. belonged to Lily Lupino, astronaut in training. For the 5th Thursday in a row, she sat cross-legged on the carpet in the amber glow of the radio's dial, grabbed the knob, and tuned in to join the baritone spaceman Trip Darrow and his squeaky sidekick, Deirdre. Tonight, the 5-part epic Mutants on Moonbase 4 would reach its thrilling conclusion. Lily took off her horn-rimmed glasses, let the living room dissolve into a blur. The opening theremin music faded, and the story picked up right where it had left off last week, with Trip and Deirdre hiking across an alien moon in search of the missing chemist, Dr. Windicott. Their footsteps thumped through moon dust. Their metal space gear clinked with every step. Their voices echoed inside their helmets.
Activate the Vita scanner, Deirdre. On a barren moon like this, even the smallest blip should lead us straight to Dr. Windicott's lab.
Golly, Mr. Darrow, do you really suppose the doc's air supply could have held out this long?
It's not his lungs I'm worried about, but his very soul.
Deirdre's Vita scanner blipped faster and faster. The hum of the theremin rose to a desperate pitch.
Mr. Darrow, look! The doc's lab! There's a light on, and there's the doc, locked inside the morphosphere.
Alive?
Tack, 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 tack. A crash of cymbals drowned out the radio, and Lily turned to see 2 piggish eyes smiling at her from under the sofa. It was Alfie, her 2-year-old brother, with his wind-up velveteen pig soldier, Colonel Shanks. "I can't hear," Lily shouted, and cranked up the knob.
Sure, he's alive all right, but he's changing.
Yes, Deirdre, mutating, before our very eyes.
"Can it in there? I'm on the telephone," growled Mr. Lupino in his study, covering the receiver and coughing pipe smoke. Actually, to call it a study isn't quite right. More of a nook between the coat rack and the broom closet, but there was room for a desk lamp, a telephone, a high-backed leather chair, and a pipe tray. And that was all Mr. Lupino needed. Well, that and a little quiet. "You hear me? Quiet, I said." "Okay," said Lily. "I'm turning it down." "No, not down. Off." "Off?" cried Lily. "But it's the conclusion." "Lily, sweetie," called Mrs. Lupino from the kitchen. Her scalp was pulled tight with curlers, her brain was adrift in show tunes, and her hands were drowning in dish suds. "You heard your father. Radio off." "Fine," groaned Lily. But when she turned the knob, she stopped just short of off, leaving just enough signal that she could hear it if she leaned in close.
I'm afraid we're too late, Deirdre. The serum's already taken hold. The doc, he's completely...
Tack, 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 tack. The clatter of cymbals pounded straight into Lily's eardrum, and she turned to find Alfie giggling, holding Colonel Shanks next to her head. She snatched the pig and sat on it. Alfie pushed and poked, but Lily wouldn't budge. He got hold of one of the colonel's legs and tugged with all his might. Stitches popped, and Alfie toppled to the floor, holding the cleanly ripped-off velveteen leg. Tears filled his eyes, his mouth gaped, and he began to wail. "Shush!" Lily yelled, pressing one ear to the warm speaker and covering the other with her palm. She shut her eyes. If she hadn't, she might have seen Mr. Lupino glaring at her through a veil of pipe smoke, his face turning red as a fire engine.
His face! He ain't human!
Mercy, Deirdre! He's seen us!
And if she weren't so close to the speaker, she might have heard the familiar squeak of Mr. Lupino's chair as he stood up, and the floorboards creaking as he marched across the floor.
Fear not, Deirdre. My Dissolvo ray will make fast work of that fiend.
Rats, Mr. Darrow! Now I've gone and done it! I forgot to charge that Dissolvo thingy. Can you ever forgive me?
The fault is mine, Deirdre. A barren moon like this is no place for a simple earth gal like you. Now, hide your eyes, dear lady. It'll all be over soon.
Hold me, Mr. Darrow! Hold me close!
A spark lit up the living room as Mr. Lupino yanked the radio's cord from the wall. The dial went dark, and the fates of Trip and Deirdre faded from Lily's ear, leaving only the din of her bawling brother. Mrs. Lupino dashed into the living room, shaking suds from her puny hands, and scooped Alfie off the floor. Alfie's piggish little eyes peered over his mother's shoulder, and Lily could swear those eyes were smiling at her. Her teeth clenched, her nostrils flared, her fists clawed into the carpet. "Bed!" snarled Mr. Lupino. "But—" began Lily. "No fuss," said Mrs. Lupino. "Go and wash up for bed." Lily grabbed her glasses and stomped off down the hall. "And brush that hair," Mrs. Lupino shouted after her. "You're looking ratty." Lily stomped into the bathroom and slammed the door behind her. She grabbed a hairbrush from the cabinet and started hacking at the stubborn knots of her long black hair. Past her scowling reflection, her eyes met the steely gaze of Trip Darrow, printed on the cover of a comic book sitting on the tank of the toilet. Trip stood, proud and heroic, with his fists on his hips, and Deirdre huddling beside him. Nobody made Trip brush his hair before bed. His hair was short and shiny, much more sensible for piloting rockets and battling the hordes of planet Reptilia. Lily propped Trip on the sink next to the mirror, opened the medicine cabinet, and swapped the brush for a pair of scissors. Shwip, 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 shwip. Angry knuckles rapped on the door. "Just a second," Lily answered, shwip, 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 as locks of black hair gathered on the tiles around her feet. "You better not be reading comic books in there," warned Mr. Lupino. "I'm not." The doorknob rattled. "Lily Lupino, you unlock this door, now." "I'm almost done, jeez," said Lily, dropping the last fistful of hair into the wastebasket. 5, Mr. Lupino began. 4, 3, 2... Lily didn't care to find out what would happen when he got to 1. She unlocked the door, gave it a gentle push. Once, when Lily was very little, she stuck a thermometer into a bubbling pot of pea soup, just to see if it would blow up. It did. Glass sprinkles flew everywhere, and Lily wasn't allowed in the kitchen for a whole year. Tonight, when the door opened and Mr. Lupino saw his daughter's handiwork, his face turned so red that Lily thought he might suffer the same fate as that old thermometer. Chapter 2. Interrogation. The evidence lay neatly on the desk. A pair of scissors, 3 locks of wavy black hair, and 1 full-color issue of Trip Darrow, Star Pilot. Smoke curled from Mr. Lupino's pipe, glowing in the light of the desk lamp. He ran his fingers over his mustache and scowled across the desk at Lily, who sat, staring into her lap. Mrs. Lupino stood off to one side, steadying herself against the coat rack, with mascara streaking down her cheeks. She stifled her sobs, and her face brightened for a second. "We'll get her a wig." "No," sighed Mr. Lupino. "Anything convincing is going to be too expensive." Then we'll just have to keep her indoors, out of sight, until it grows back.
And have her falling behind in school? No.
He snapped his fingers.
I know. We'll say it was an accident. She wandered a little too close to your electric fan, and it ripped the hair right off her head.
He was clearly proud of this suggestion, and confused when it only made Mrs. Lupino sob all the more. He scowled at Lily.
Well, I hope you're proud of yourself. You've finally done it. You've broken your mother. And after all she's done to make a decent, normal little lady out of you. First you tear up your brother's favorite pig. I've never seen him so upset.
I didn't tear it up. He did.
No tantrums.
Tantrums. Little Alfie could be screeching like a barn owl, oozing from every hole in his purple face, and Mr. Lupino would say that he was upset, but if Lily so much as raised an eyebrow, it was always a tantrum.
Then you hole yourself up in the bathroom and mutilate yourself. Whatever possessed you to do that to your head?
Lily shrugged. She knew he wouldn't like her answer.
You answer me right now, young lady.
Astronauts don't have long hair, Lily stated. In zero gravity, it floats around inside your helmet and tickles your face. Mr. Lupino's face turned so red that his teeth and the whites of his eyes seemed to glow. Then he cooled himself with a long pull of his pipe.
Tell me, he said, do you know any other girls your age caught up in this space baloney?
Lily stared at her lap. She hardly knew any girls her age, period, and had neither a clue nor a care what caught them up.
Of course you don't, because they're all busy doing the things normal little girls do. What about that expensive tea set Nana Lucille bought you? Have you even tried it?
Lily shook her head.
Well, you'll soon have plenty of time for tea parties, because tonight you bid farewell to Mr. Trip Darrow.
He tore the cover off the comic book.
And Flash Gordon, and Buck Rogers, and all the other space cadets.
He ripped out page after page until the comic was stripped bare. Then he tore the pages up until there was nothing left but a mound of motley, star-spangled confetti. He brushed it off the desk into the wastebasket. Finally, he dumped the dregs from his coffee mug on top of them.
Lily Lupino, he declared, you're not an astronaut, so just put that thought out of your head for good.
Why?
Because that's no job for a lady.